All right, welcome to this Excel video. It's going to be about two things. I'm going to do one Excel sheet dealing with credit cards and kind of the finance charge, the new balance, making a minimum payment, and how it affects. And so we can see how it works over the course of many months. And then we're going to move on to the sheet 2 in Excel, and we're going to do an interest problem, comparing simple and compound interest and what that looks like in Excel using formulas. So here in this credit card, you can see in the first line here that I've got a beginning balance of $4,000, and that's my carryover balance. So that is what we will start with and have our finance charge. That's what it's going to be applied to. Our APR is 24.99%, and our minimum payment is 3%. So when I go to fill this in, I'm going to start just my beginning, and I know that I have $4,000, and I need a starting spot. So think about when we calculated our finance charge. So on paper, we said, well, we had to take that APR as a decimal, change it to monthly, so divide by 12, and then we multiplied by our beginning balance. So let's go ahead and do that. Remember, when you're typing a formula into Excel, you start with an equal sign. After that, what did I say? I said the APR as a decimal, so there's my 0.2499, and we want to divide that by 12 because that makes it monthly. Well, now I want to multiply by my starting balance. And because we want to use formulas, I'm going to click on that B3 cell in order for the 4,000 go in. So now that my formula is entered in, I hit enter, and my finance charge is $83.30. Now, if you want this all to appear as money, it's a pretty easy thing to do. If you can highlight, see this dollar sign right here? If you just click on that, it turns everything into money. Okay, sorry, back to the sheet. How do we find our new balance? So our new balance, if you remember, is our starting balance, $4,000. Add to that the finance charge. So notice how I used the cell notations for both of those and hit enter, and now I have my new balance. All right, minimum payment is 3%. You remember how we found that? 3% of the balance. Remember, of is multiplication. So I want the new balance, and we're going to multiply that by 0.03. And my minimum payment for this particular example is $122.50. Okay, how do I find my starting balance for the next month? Well, if I had a balance of $4,083.30 and I take away the amount that I paid, that's going to give me what's left. Now that I have officially done this, you'll notice now for starting balance, finance charge, new balance, and minimum payment, I have a cell reference in all of those. So first things first, I'm going to drag these months out to make it 12 months so we can look at a whole year. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you highlight all three of these, it shows a pattern. I'm going to put my cursor on the corner so that it becomes like a black plus sign. If I click and drag, I can go ahead and it'll come down just like it is it'll just keep the pattern going. Okay, so now I have months 1 through 12. And here's a beautiful thing now. So I want these cell references to replicate. If you have a particular month that it started with, right? So I started by using I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Because I have one column already stopped, if I go to this next button, I could click and drag down, and that would work. I could also just double click on this corner. So I still have the black plus sign. If I double click, it fills in. Now you might be saying, you're wrong, you have like minus signs. Well, yeah, because those references, this references is D4 and E4, and if you notice, I don't have anything in D4 and E4 yet. So until those are filled in, what's the word I'm looking for? Occupied maybe, there will be nothing. So I'm just going to go through each one of these, get the black plus sign, double click. Get the black plus sign, double click. Get the black plus sign, double click. And now notice I now have 12 months worth of finance charges and minimum payments. So notice after a full year, and I can go ahead and sum this up, right? Remember how we used our formulas? I can go to, well, let's just use sum. If I want to sum those up, I paid $1,393.29 to go, those are the payments I made. How much of that was finance charges? Let's sum up our finance charges. What happened there? There we go. Almost $1,000 of that was finance charge. Isn't that depressing? So you can do a lot of things using this sheet. Now, I could take this out as long as I wanted to, right? We could drag this out. Gosh darn it, what am I doing? I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag it out just for fun down to 142 months because I can, right? So I'm just going to go ahead again and double click. See how quickly you can populate an entire spreadsheet. So now I want to go back down to my 142 months. You know, how many years is 140? 120 months is 10 years, right? So this is well over 10 years. And look, at 142 months, this is over 10 years, you still owe almost $1,000 if you only make the minimum payment. And this is why credit cards can really get you in trouble. So the minimum payment is really not good, right? You want to make more than a minimum payment, especially if you have a balance of $4,000. You need to up your payment a little bit. All right, so that's kind of an example of how to go through and use it for credit cards. Let's go to sheet 2 and check out our interest. So again, I started with just years. Now notice we have years 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to go ahead and just drag that out. Excuse me for a little bit. Now, if you notice, I have simple interest, then the simple balance. So using the simple interest, what is the balance? We know that in our formula for compound interest, we're going to get the balance, and then how then do we find the compound interest? So I want to be able to compare the interest columns as well as the balance columns after a certain number of years. So let's start with simple interest. Formula for simple interest, principal times rate times time. Okay, so equals, my principal is $4,000 times my rate, the APR is 3.2%, so as a decimal is 0.032, times the time, and again we want a cell reference so that we can drag. So my cell reference would be 1 year. So after 1 year I have $128 in simple interest, and boom, I now have the interest. Notice how it goes up by $128 every time, right? Simple interest is linear, increases by the same amount each year. Now, how do we find the balance? Well, what did you start with? And then we're going to add to it the interest. So I started with $4,000, and I'm going to add my interest. So for year 1, I'm going to add the 128. Okay, because we have a cell reference, I can double click, and again, you will see my balance increases by $128 a month. That should make sense. All right, so the compounding interest formula is where it gets a little interesting. So remember, principal, and then in parentheses, 1 plus the rate divided by the number of times you're compounding, raised to the number of times you're compounding times the number of years. All right, so let's type that in. I start with my principal, $4,000. Now I want to times, and you do need to put that little multiplication star. If you only put the parentheses, it will give you an error. So you need times, inside the parentheses, I want 1 plus my rate, 0.032, divided by 12, end parentheses. And then I want to raise that. Whoa, how did I get out of my formula there? Raise to, okay, what power am I raising to? Well, in parentheses, I'm raising it to the 12 because I'm compounding monthly times the number of years. All right, so that's where the cell reference comes into play. 12 times the number of years. Enter. Get rid of that sign. So you notice how why is that? Oh, because we're compounding. Excuse me, because we're compounding monthly. That's why it's different. Okay, sorry. Answer my own question. Okay, so you notice that even after the first year, it's a little different because we compounded every month. So every month you had a little bit more added to your balance, which allowed your the amount in your account to increase more rapidly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and double click, and that fills in. Look at the balances. After 15 years, you have, an extra $400 by compounding monthly versus simple interest. And then, how do I figure out my interest from compounding? So remember, our compound is kind of opposite as simple, is that we start with our balance. So if I take my balance and I'm going to subtract my principal, which was $4,000, that tells me how much I earned in interest. So I'm going to go ahead and double click, and now we can, oh, this is a good example. If you see all these dollar signs or pound signs or whatever, it means that the number is too large to fit in the cells for as wide as they are. So if you go up here between E and F, you see that kind of like a line with two arrows. If you double click, it will automatically resize your cell so all your numbers fit. Okay, so now I can compare my compound interest and my simple interest. Why did those? Okay, there we go. I want to compare these two. So you can look after 13 years, you know, there's an extra $400, which we just talked about that in terms of the balances, but now you can see the difference in the interest. And if you wanted to graph these, if I hold down my control key, and then I can click and I can drag, and I can let go back over to compound, click and drag, so that I've highlighted just the interest. Then I can go up to insert, I want to do a line graph. What? Of course. Some chart types can be combined with other chart types. What? I don't understand what they're saying. Obviously, I didn't try this before the video, but I've done this before and it worked out okay. There we go. No, that is not what I'm looking for. Delete. All right, well, you can graph these. I'm not sure why it won't let me. Maybe it's because they're in two different spots. That looks horrible. Goodness gracious. I am using Excel 07, which we could blame that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. You can see in the blue is the simple, and notice how it's straight. It's linear. Same thing we talked about in terms of our packet that we looked at. And then that red line has a curve to it. So if you went out for 80 years and you had a bigger scope of time, that red line is really going to curve higher because obviously you're going to grow more. Whereas that blue line would still just be a solid straight line because it's growing linearly. So that, I hope that was a pretty decent video, at least to kind of help you with using your formulas in Excel. And I'll have another one of these videos of Excel for mortgages and 401ks and things later on in this unit. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.